This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 72 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. It's all about museum love because I know lots of travellers really love to spend a day or a half a day in a museum in various interesting places around the world. And so I'm going to chat to three people today who have some interesting tales to tell us about their museum love. Now, I am a big fan of museums, but let's say I don't love all museums, but I really love the ones I love. So if it hits the right chord with me, I will be very enthusiastic about it. Now, I'm not sure what the exact recipe is for hitting the right chord with me if you're a museum, but there's some combination of a topic that really interests me and a display that is really well done, I suppose. So, kind of interesting. There's stories to be seen, not just screeds and screeds of kind of dry-looking academic texts. I could read that somewhere else. I don't know. But, let me tell you some of the museums that I particularly love around the world. My favourite ever is the Anne Frank Museum in Amsterdam. Please go there. Berlin is a city that for me has a lot of great museums. My two favourites would be the Jewish Museum and the House am Checkpoint Charlie, or the Checkpoint Charlie Museum, I think they call it in English, which documents a lot of the escape attempts over the wall. I've always been, very long time, been fascinated with that. When I was in my final year of high school, I studied theatre arts and we had to put together a one-man show, they called it. They didn't even change it to one-woman show, although I was at an all-girls school. But anyway, it was a one-man show that we had to script and perform ourselves, and mine was about the Berlin Wall. So seeing House am Checkpoint Charlie Museum a few years later brought all of my research for that one-man show to life. But anyway, I digress. Other museums I love, weirdly, in Riga, the capital of Latvia, I will always remember the Museum of the Occupation of Latvia. It was fascinatingly done, great artifacts, great storytelling. Do go there if you get to Riga, and you should, because Riga is amazing. In Tunisia, I will always remember the Bardo Museum, which, among other things, has amazing ancient mosaics, just gorgeous. In Japan, in Kobe, the Great Hanshin Earthquake Museum. It has a much longer name, which escapes my mind at the moment, but it's in memorial of the Kobe earthquake, and also with the intention of preparing people for what to do in the event of an earthquake and how to prepare for the likelihood of one. But also just, really well done. So that's a quick list of some of my favourite museums around the world. I'm always looking for more. And especially now that I have a son to travel with, all children are more discerning about museums, let's say. It has to be, he's interested and he loves his history, but, he's still only 7. So it has to be pretty interesting to really interest him. So that's another criteria for museum love these days for me. But anyway, let's get on to hear about what other people think about museums around the world. Now, my first guest today is basically a complete museum geek. So she has lots to enthuse about museums, but she actually tells us about one of her most recent trips and some really interesting museum stuff. And it's Leah Smileski, who has recently come back from a trip to Macedonia.
I adore museums. I seek museums out wherever we go, even if it's little towns like Cowra in rural New South Wales. I found some museums there, a museum there. Mm. But I think one of the oddest museums I've been to was quite recently, and again, it's because it's my most recent travel experience. That's in Skopje, in Macedonia's capital city. They have a number of museums that they've built recently. So they have the Museum of the Macedonian Struggle, and which talks about oppression of the country. They have their archaeological museum. They have a Holocaust museum because they had a lot of Jews living there prior to World War II, and the National Museum. And why I found these fascinating was not only because there was a number of different exhibits in each of them and a real rich collation of artefacts. The most surprising thing was that we were always the only people in there.
No way.
These are huge, enormous buildings. And, for example, the Archaeological Museum, we went in there and were able to see ancient coins. So from, say, Alexander the Great, coins from his time, coins from different Roman emperors who had cities within what is now modern Macedonia, lots of different artefacts. And there was literally, and not exaggerating, no other families or people in these museums that were 2 or 3 stories high. It didn't mean that the guards, the security guards, followed us around from it. I think they were about 4 metres behind us the whole way through, which was
nothing
really
else to do.
Disarming. Yeah. No, they didn't have anything else to do. It was a pristine museums, absolutely beautiful. And the curators have set these exhibits up to showcase all of the items, but nobody's visiting them.
Wow.
And I went for lunch with people from the capital city, and they asked me what I'd done that day, and I said, we went to the Archaeological Museum, for example. And I said, why would you go there?
Oh.
And I explained, I'm really interested in knowing about the history, and they just found that fascinating that people would. And
so
I'm going to have
culturally
to reflect on that.
Yeah, wow.
I don't know if they don't care about their culture. I don't think that's it. I think some of it could be to do with money,
right?
And that you have to pay for these things. Okay. And Macedonia is a developing country,
right?
So I think the average wage is around €500 a month, and it cost us maybe 30 Australian dollars. It was in dinner, so.
Okay,
it must be €20 to go.
Yeah.
Perhaps that's why. Some of them were free and still there weren't people in there.
Gosh.
I just found that fascinating that you'd have all of these museums with amazing artefacts in them. I'm a bit of an artefact nerd, so I like chasing them and finding out what's in there. And there wasn't anybody in there.
Wow, what a shame. This was in summer, European summer, right? So you think it would be
European
kind of
summer,
peak touristy kind of season? Yeah, wow.
Yeah, that's right. But then again, I didn't find that there were many tourists that we could identify in Macedonia a lot of the time. There were people that had connections to Macedonia, so family connections, who may be travelling around there. But I didn't see a lot of people. But my friends from Denmark, one of my best friends lives in Denmark. She was an exchange student. We've kept being in contact for 20-odd years. She decided to meet me in Macedonia.
Oh, how
and she
nice.
said, which is only 2 hours flight, and she said, I had no idea the country was here.
Right.
I had no idea how cheap it was. It's cheaper than Thailand, she said. Cheaper for them to go there than Thailand. She said better, and she felt it was better for her at that time with her young kids because there's no jet lag.
Oh, yes,
she said, I'll be telling my friends about this. I had no idea. And you can go to all these museums and nobody else is there. So you have them to yourself. And the travels are quite amazing around that country.
I'm going to put a link in the show notes to a post that Leah's written on her blog about Skopje in particular, because it lists a bunch of these really amazing and surprisingly empty museums that she found in the Macedonian capital. Now, my next guests today are a couple, Elizabeth and Jeff Newcamp, who are Americans currently living in the Netherlands with their 3 very small children. I think, if I'm right, they're 3 kids who are 3 boys, in fact, who are 5 and under at the moment. So when they get to museums, it's quite a different experience to what many people have, but it sounds to me like they do museums very well.
The Netherlands has a program called the Museum Cart, or Museum Card program, and over 400 museums are free to enter with this card. And for a year subscription, it's €55 for adults.
And there's a visitor's one as well.
At 20-some euros for kids. Yeah, in the visitor one, you can get It's about the same price. And so if you're here more than a week, it makes sense to get a museum card. And boy,
but I mean,
we
all
made good use.
All the big names are on it. So
wow, that's excellent.
Every sponsored museum.
Yeah, the Rijksmuseum, the Van Gogh Museum, the Maurits House, like all of those. But it also includes all these like little local gems.
Oh, gorgeous.
So we're in this little town called Delft, and in our town, like the Science Museum is part of it, and the Botanical Gardens is part of it.
So it encourages you with families to go out and explore things, the smaller museums that have kids programming and small cafes, to just give you great days out with your children. Things we would have never tried if it were a €10 admission fee. But now you've got this card, it just empowers you to go places like this Miffy Museum in Utrecht called Nijntje to the Dutch people. A tiny little museum, perfect for children. Would have never gone there otherwise.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah, I think one of the real advantages of programs like the Museum Cart, particularly when you have kids, is that we would not otherwise take the kids to the Van Gogh Museum or to the Rijksmuseum because of the cost, right?
Yeah.
Like we'd think, oh, well, we're never going to recoup our even €7 because we will get to see 3 things. But with the Museum Cart, it's like we will go into The Hague and go to one of these museums and tote the children around to the highlights for us. And if we get more time, great. And if not, it doesn't matter.
Perfect.
Because, we can really pop in, see a couple things, do a
great
family
point,
program.
Yeah, you can, when it's the right time to leave, you can leave. And so you don't overextend your children. I see this at places like Disney World.
Yeah.
Where,
yes.
Well, we bought a ticket. We're going to stay 12 hours until those fireworks are over.
Yeah.
But with this museum card, as Elizabeth says, it's ideal.
Yeah, that's
well, I just think like the Van Gogh Museum is something that has a bunch of stuff that's great for kids, but even our 5-year-old can only do so much. And it was like when we did a weekend in Amsterdam, we took all the kids there, and when they got tired, one of us left and went outside, ran around, play. The other people could enjoy their visit, but Henry, the 5-year-old, still has this. He's seen a Van Gogh now, and he has learned something about them. And I think that experience extends to all these little museums. We've taken them to museums on the water line here and on how the water management system works. Things that they all have little kids things, but they're not geared at children. But we're able to go because of this card, which I think is great.
Oh, yeah, that is really fabulous. And it kind of helps you like bring up your kids with a love of museums instead of them feeling like, oh, yeah, we had to go and spend like 4 hours there and it got so boring in the end. They have the positive experience instead of, because kids, especially that young age, they just don't have the concentration span and it's just impractical to imagine spending a long time there. But that way you can give them positive experiences and then later they'll go back.
Right, exactly. We've also found that in Europe, almost every museum, if you ask, has some kind of kids scavenger hunt or kids program. And some of them might not be in English, but they're usually kind of picture-based anyway. So we've just also found that when we're traveling around, we always just ask at the desk, hey, do you have anything for kids? And sometimes they're like, one museum, I think in Germany, had this like box the kids took around with them, and it had a color project, like a little suitcase. So I think... if anyone's traveling here, there's no harm in asking. And I think when people don't have something, they usually just offer the kids something. Like they'll give them a piece of paper and a pencil or just something to do. And a lot of them give them little prizes for completing.
Yeah, that's the hook.
Yeah.
If our kids know they're going to get a sticker or a balloon at the end, they will faithfully do the activity and participate in the museum.
Yeah, I bet.
I think those are a great to always ask because you never know.
Yeah, that's a genius tip. Really good. Yeah.
Tell me about the best museum you've ever been to.
So we went to this.
I want to know too.
City it's in, so I have to have you talk about it.
We went to this transportation museum in Lucerne, Switzerland.
Yeah.
And our biggest mistake was that we didn't budget more time here. We kind of decided to go here last minute and filled kind of the end of the day, and we could have spent the whole day there. But it had some of the best exhibits. I mean, all your typical, it had some airplanes to look at, some trains, some cars, but it also just had little boats that the kids could drive around on this pool in the center.
No way.
Like boats you could get in, and the kids drove them. It had this construction site to work on.
With diggers.
And I mean, it just had... It was unbelievable. And I think when we're traveling with the kids, we're often trying to balance, like, we want to see some of the culture and things that are significant to there, but also see kind of things that they enjoy. And I think, although you can go to a transportation museum in many cities, this one was just, I mean, one of the best. Whether your child is obsessed with planes, cars, buses, I mean, they had a section on every type of transportation.
Wow.
And just so many incredible exhibits.
That sounds amazing. And I can...
Scooters. The kids could just take scooters and scoot around the museum.
Oh, unreal. I can't let my son listen to this because we were in Luzern a couple of years ago and we did not go there. I didn't even know about it.
It's like over on a little, we had to take the boat.
We took a ferry over.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Oh, gorgeous.
But it was incredible. I mean, we literally hit it as like, we have some time to kill. Let's just go do this transportation museum. I think we even sat in the middle and had a beer.
We did.
And the kids were on these scooters.
Yes, we did.
That's even more perfect.
We thought, we should have just been here all day.
I think that first, second, third time travelers to Europe, people on holidays, will spend their time in the cities, seeing old things, getting good experience of the culture. But if you're living in Europe and you have seen a lot of these old city centers, you start to look for these niche activities. And the Transportation Museum in Lucerne was just a home run. It got us outside of the old city, got us into something that was designed for children that we also enjoyed as parents. And when you can find a win like that, you just want to share it with everybody.
Yeah, it looks amazing. I've just Googled it as we speak, and I've discovered that not only does it have everything that you've just described, it also has the Swiss chocolate adventure multimedia theme world. I'm like, whoa, chocolate.
We did not do there, but they also have moved the chocolate experience there. I mean, you could literally spend all day there.
You could spend days there.
Yeah, you probably could spend days
there.
It's
crazy, just a day. There are 5 pavilions.
Yeah, I mean, we
did all
one.
of these things. And in the aircraft pavilion, the children could act like they were baggage handlers at an airport and move, and then they can go down a slide like their suitcases.
Yeah, and they had a like TSA, like a security check, and they had these suitcases, and it went through, and you could see different items, and you would decide whether to open them or not. I mean,
oh my gosh, my son would be in heaven. Absolutely, he would love all of that. Oh my goodness, we have to get back there.
Yes, it was great.
In general, just as a generalization, I find that European museums do it so well. We haven't been disappointed by many European museums, whether they're art museums, cultural museums, children's museums.
That's true.
I sense like if they're going to do a museum, they want to do it well.
Yeah, that's my experience in Europe too. I agree. They seem to have, just a really good balance between information and entertainment and just high quality kind of experiences. You see what I mean? I think Elizabeth and Jeff do museums well, and I need to get back to Luzern now to see this amazing museum. It's called the Verkehrshaus, which literally translates to traffic house, I think. Maybe transport house, perhaps. But it seems like a mega museum. I also looked up about the museum cart that they mentioned for Amsterdam, and I think I'm right in saying that I found it's now only for Dutch residents to be able to get the annual card. But there's a similar one for tourists, which is not quite as good value, but still very worthwhile if you're going to go to more than a couple of museums. So I'll leave some links in the show notes about that as well. Now, my final guest today is Samantha Fisher. Now, I met Sam, I think 3 years ago, but it could have been 2, when I was running a course here in Perth. I run a course every summer at the local university about travel writing, and not to become a travel writer necessarily, but to write your travel journals and diaries well, and to find alternatives and different ideas for how to keep a memory and a record of your travels. So anyway, Sam was visiting from the States. She was on a working holiday in Australia, and she came along to that course, and we just hit it off. I loved her writing, and I loved all the travel experiences she'd already had. So we've kept in touch, and now she's on the podcast. And her kind of summary of her level of museum love is kind of similar to mine, I have to say.
I'm a museum sampler. I'm not I'm in the museum in the morning and I'm there all day kind of person. I'm much more of a couple of hours. that's kind of my limit. With the exception of the Louvre. I think I was there for a very long time and loved it. But I love also strange museums.
Ooh.
And I love small museums. I love museums that feel very intimate, that are not grandiose, that are not showy, that are, in converted homes or just comparatively small. I lived in Amsterdam for a number of years and loved the Van Gogh Museum. Now, the Van Gogh Museum is it's very, very, very visited. But it's also really small. You can do it in just a couple of hours and see everything.
Mm-hmm, true.
Which I love. I also love the Rijksmuseum. But it's larger, it's more grandiose, it has a very different feel to it. There's a different kind of museum love, I suppose, that I have for various types.
Yeah, that's allowed.
I think my favorite museum ever was probably the Musée Rodin in Paris. I hadn't really been all that familiar with Rodin before I went. And the friend that I was traveling with was really big into him and was like, we have to go. Okay, let's go. And it's beautiful. And now I think we were lucky enough to be there at the perfect moment on the perfect day, as often happens, I think, in travel. Where perfect moments find you.
Yes.
But the sun was coming and it was afternoon. The sun was slanting through the windows. There was a lull in the number of people, so we had it mostly to ourselves. And it's so beautiful. It's just this series of rooms, and each one is just filled with these incredible sculptures. And with the lighting and the quietude, it was stunning. And I think that's why it's one of my favorites, is because we had the experience we had there.
Yeah.
I also just love his work. But to be there and to have that experience really elevated it, I believe.
Yes, that's true. I think sometimes you need to be in the right museum at just the right time or with the right people, and then it changes that experience to be not just good but great.
Yes, I definitely think that's true. It's the first time I went to the Louvre, I was with my boyfriend at the time, who was French and had been there a million times and was like, fine, we can go. And was zooming through the whole thing. And I was trying to keep up, and I was like, oh, there goes the Mona Lisa. And it was so fast paced and it was crazy busy. Again, it was summer and all of this stuff. And then I went back a second time. My family came to visit me when I was living in the Netherlands, and we took a trip to France, to Paris, and we went to the Louvre, but we took our time. Mm-hmm. And so that was a completely different experience. Even though I was looking at things I'd seen before, I hadn't quite seen them, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And
you hadn't
so
properly seen them.
Right. I was able to really see them more, absorb them differently. And so now I hold the Louvre much more fondly in my memory than I would have if I hadn't had that second chance at it, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think I need to go back. I had one of those kind of rushed experiences there on a very busy day, and I just didn't love it. So someday I will get back to Paris and have another look.
Well, and I think there's something to be said. I tend to, might be divulging a big travel secret.
Ooh, tell me more.
I go at the end of the day. And I kind of hang out until the last possible moment when they're like, the museum is closing in 10, the museum is closing in 5, the museum is closing. Y'all got to get out of here. But if you hang out in those last moments, you can find these beautiful little pockets of time where you can observe alone in a room that is normally full of people, or comparatively alone. I mean, some of these museums, have massive rooms, and to be alone in one is pretty impossible. But, you can find those moments a lot more if you are willing to be, the last person ushered out the door. You can find those, I think, a lot easier.
I think Sam and I summed it up well. You have to be at the right museum at the right time with the right people, and then that's when you fall in love with a museum. And I have definitely done that in multiple places. So that's it for today's episode about museum love. Please hop over to the Facebook group. You'll find it at Thoughtful Travellers, or there's a link in the show notes. Tell me, what is your favourite museum? I would love to have a huge list of favourite museum recommendations from people all around the world. That will give me all kinds of places to aspire to visit in the future. Also, while you're thinking about doing stuff, it would be fabulous if you could also leave a review for the Thoughtful Travel podcast in Apple Podcasts or iTunes, because, as you may recall, the reviews that were left before did disappear when we moved the podcast from a different host, which was very sad. Although I didn't actually cry, I felt like crying. So it would be wonderful if you could hop over and leave a review. I always love reading them. They totally give me a huge thrill. And thank you so much to everyone who's left a review already. I will leave a bunch of links in the show notes to things that we talked about in the show today, but as well there are links to our wonderful guests. So first up, we spoke with Leah, who's from the blog Kid Bucket List. You can find her at kidbucketlist.com.au. And then we spoke with Elizabeth and Jeff, who are from the blog Dutch Goose. Cool name, hey? And they're at dutchgoose.com. And last but very not least is Sam Fisher, and she is starting a new site at highhopestravel.com. At the moment, it's still on a coming soon page, but you can perhaps find her more actively at the moment at Instagram, and on Instagram, she is also High Hopes Travel. So you can also catch up with me on Twitter. Tweet me at Amanda Kendall and use the hashtag ThoughtfulTravelPod. Or, of course, head over to the Facebook group Thoughtful Travellers and ask to join. I always love to see new faces in that group. All of this info and more will be in the show notes, and today's show notes can be found at notaballerina.com/72. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.